So yesterday the AFL Grand Final was held. My team didn't make it. I was sharing, if you were at Mass last week, I was sharing with you my distress at that. We nearly made it. And the team that won have beaten us in many occasions, and so this was not a source of great joy for me. And I know the Swans fans who are watching, this is not a great source of joy for you either. But I want, so obviously I'm going to show you something now, and it's not because I'm excited about the results of the game or anything like that. So stay with me. There's a point for the clip. I'm going to ask Sonia to put up on the screen now. Thanks, Sammy. Okay. So the person that you saw going over was Joel Selwood, who's the captain of the Geelong football team. What I want you to know about the moment there, it's a little bit hard. I watched it a few times. You got to really catch it. Did you see when he saw Sammy? So the young man's name is Sammy. When Joel Selwood saw him, you could read his lips, and if you pay really careful attention to the audio, you can hear it. He says, Sammy, just calls out his name, right? So Joel Selwood knows this young man. Oh, look. It's a beautiful moment, huh? What has this got to do with the passage that we've just heard in the gospel today? Well, it's something to do with Jesus being a masterful storyteller here. Because when Jesus tells this story about this rich man and Lazarus, and he's doing it to make a very important point, and the point's reasonably obvious, but maybe the point that we don't see straight up is just simply that, to begin with, one of the characters in the story has a name. One of the stories has a name. Lazarus, the poor man, has a name. And then the rich man is nameless. The tradition has him as Dives, but that just simply means rich. The tradition's given us that name to say this is a rich guy. And what really spoke to me, what struck me about this moment of Joel Selwood seeing Sammy was he says, Sammy, and then he gets him and he grabs him and he pulls him over the fence. Jeremy Cameron, one of the other players, puts his premiership medallion over him, and you saw the joy on this young man's face, right? They knew this kid. I'm no fan of the Geelong Football Club, but they knew this kid, right? And they cared about him enough to let him join in the celebration in the most beautiful of ways, huh? In the story today, the way that Jesus tells the story, Lazarus has a name. This poor man who sits at the gate, and he's so poor that he has nothing, he's starving, he doesn't have a roof over his head. He sits at the gate begging, and we're told he's so poor that he lacks so much that even the dogs come. That's not a nice, consoling image. That's a sign of just how desperate his circumstances were, that even the dogs bringing infection could come to him. But Lazarus has a name in the story. The rich man doesn't. What strikes me here in the way that Jesus tells the story, because there's a great reversal coming. When Lazarus and the rich man die, we're told that Lazarus goes to Abraham's bosom. In other words, that Lazarus goes to be right at the right-hand side of Abraham, their father of faith, right in the presence of all that is good in the afterworld, in the next life. And the rich man, who had been used to everything, we're told he dined sumptuously, magnificently every day. He's in this place of torment where he doesn't have enough, where he's in great pain and agony. It's a changing of roles. The great Luke is the master of reversals, of turning things upside down. And so this poor man, but a poor man who has a name, is now precious and right in the heart of God and God's people, with Abraham right next to the most prized and privileged person of faith. The point of Jesus' story, I think, first and foremost, is really obvious to us, and that is that we're challenged, I think, we're to be deeply challenged about who is on the gate, who sits at the gates around us, who's on the edge of the wall, as it were. Because when judgment comes, when eternity lands, when heaven is opened up, we have that image here of the chasm between those who have just lived for themselves and those who are poor, but those who have a name. I remember some years ago I was in Jerusalem, and I decided that I was going to catch the bus, just the normal commercial bus from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. It's only a short drive. Someone had suggested that I do that, and so I did, and then I walked through the checkpoint, through the gate, behind the wall that the Israelis have put up between Israel and Bethlehem, so marking off the Palestinian community from the Israeli community. I remember walking through that gate, and I was never in trouble, right? So 6'3" white guy walking through, it was never going to be a problem for me. But as I joined this long queue of people going about their everyday business, as I thought about the gate that let some of them in and some of them out, but you had to be on the right side in order for that to happen. I remember too when I lived in the Philippines many years ago now, if you walked out of our house and you turned right 50 metres down the road, you came to a huge gate. And on the other side of that gate, which was guarded by men with guns, there was a subdivision, a gated compound, in which there were bigger houses and more money, nicer cars than I, who'd grown up in middle-class suburban Canberra, had ever seen. I'd never seen anything like it. But if you walked out of our house and you went left, you went into one of the largest squatter areas of Manila. Open sewers, people living in 2 or 3 rooms, and there might be 10 people living in the house. And the people who went down to the subdivision had to drive past that to get to their gate. We live in this country and we live in this part of our city. It's a beautiful place. I'm grateful to God every day that I get to live here. And so there aren't obvious gates to our community. But there are gates in different places, aren't there? And some gates aren't physical. You know, our island continent, our island nation has gates. You know, our closest neighbour is East Timor, and I've been fortunate enough to visit there too. And the kind of poverty that you see from to our nearest neighbour on our doorstep, well, there's a gate there. We've done terrible things to East Timor in the name of money. We have absolutely been the rich man as a country in relation to East Timor and gas contracts and extracting their natural wealth for our purposes. There's a gate there. I remember the first time I lived in Sydney, I was about to move, and just before I did that, I had to come up for the work that I was doing, and I stayed at the cathedral, and I decided that I'd just go for an early morning walk around the Domain. It was June, and I was absolutely flabbergasted by the number of people that were sleeping rough in June in our city, 20 minutes away. There are all sorts of gates. They don't have to be physical ones. But the thing that we're invited to discover and to recognise here is that the people who sit on the edge of those gates, they have names. They have names. They have names. I'm very proud of our parish, you're such a generous group of people. When we put a call out for a particular need, when we say, look, there's something here that we need you to do, when there's a financial need, there's a call for whether it's the regular kind of things for Caritas and Catholic Mission and so on, or whether there's a specific need for a particular ministry or a particular need, you just give so generously. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think that's a recognition that we know some of our challenges. But one of the things that strikes me in the light of the gospel today, and I think it's something that you have felt because I've listened to you talk about it in some ways, I think it's the feeling that you want to actually just do more than say, we just want to throw money at something, because you instinctively know that these people, that there are Lazaruses who have names, that there are people. It's not just about giving something that doesn't kind of have any connection other than we've just given from our excess, we've given from our surplus. But it's a recognition that you know that you want to support and care for those who are on the gate, who are at the gate, those who are hurting and suffering in some way. I think it's a challenge in a place like Penshurst, because there'll be other parts of the city where Lazarus would be very visible to us. We would know the Lazarus is in our midst very visibly, very easily. It can be a little bit hidden in a place like here. But I think it's really important that we do something as a parish to actually make sure that we know who the Lazaruses are, that we actually enter into genuine relationship and friendship, that we don't just simply say, well, we've thrown money at an issue or a problem, but that we've actually really connected and made friends with and become close to people who are hurting, suffering, poor. What's at stake here is the gospel. What's at stake here is our faithfulness to Jesus. One of the things that I feel most strongly about is that church can't be something where you think, oh, it's nice to come on a Sunday morning. It's lovely. It's sort of, it's a good way to start the week. It's a lovely thing every now and then. Like, it either matters or it doesn't. It either changes the world or it's useless. It's either of all consequence or of no consequence. And it doesn't matter. It couldn't be more important than this. It couldn't be more important than this. That our faith in Jesus, that our desire to respond with love to the love that we have received gets expressed in really tangible ways, that we don't just throw money at an issue, but that we discover and know who Lazarus is in our midst. Whether that's right here in our neighbourhood or in our city, in our country, and because we're members of a global village in our world. It either matters for eternity or it doesn't matter at all. It either matters for our eternal future or it doesn't matter at all. But there just isn't a halfway. There just isn't. As I said, I'm really conscious of your hearts. Like, I see the way, and I've watched the way you respond whenever there's a need. And so I do want to put a need out before you, because I think that what we want to do here is to try and make ways where we actually express our sense of community and we live out community, our faith community, our parish community, with people who are hurting and suffering in really practical ways. And I think all that we need for that is actually just a little bit of help in coordinating it and making it happen. So one of the things that I'd like to do is I'd like to just have somebody come onto the staff of the parish, and their job will be to help us connect. Their task will be to help us connect so that we're able to really engage in a really genuine way of ministering, but also simply befriending the Lazaruses in our midst. Practically caring for, meeting the needs of those who are suffering and hurting, but also knowing their name. I don't think we want to stand before God and say we didn't know who Lazarus was. I certainly don't.